On a September afternoon in 2022, a 112 call hit the Gangnam police dispatch about a man in his 40s completely losing his mind in public, slurring his speech, stumbling around, vomit visible around his mouth, just running through the streets in a visibly disturbed state. When cops dragged him in and reportedly found dozens of pills scattered around his house, Korean media did exactly what it always does when a celebrity is involved. They didn't wait for the facts. They didn't wait for a name. They dropped breadcrumbs. A male actor in his 40s, debuted in 2006 on a terrestrial network, spent years bouncing between supporting and lead roles, and just like that, the internet guessing game began, and it was genuinely ugly to watch. Netizens went into a full-blown witch hunt. Message boards and Twitter feeds turned into chaos. Park Hoon's name got thrown into the ring first, his agency forced to immediately jump out and threaten legal action just to stop the bleeding from a rumor that had zero truth to it. Then Lee Musang got dragged into the mess, his people having to issue the exact same panic denials. It is terrifying how fast the K-drama community will turn on its own actors based on a few vague descriptors from a news outlet. While completely innocent actors were scrambling to protect their reputations from baseless claims, the actual guy sitting in that police cell was going through what he later described as the worst mental breakdown of his life. When the media finally dropped the blind item and revealed the name, it was Lee Sangbo. Fans couldn't believe it. This was the guy from Miss Monty Cristo, the steady, reliable character actor who had spent over a decade and a half grinding in the background, finally getting his moment as a leading man, earning actual praise from critics for his grounded screen presence. But the public narrative was already written for him before he even opened his mouth. Korea's zero-tolerance drug policy is a rigid machine, and once you're caught in its gears, the public generally doesn't want to hear your side of the story. You're guilty in the court of public opinion the second the headline drops. But Sangbo didn't play the scripted, repentant celebrity role. He sat down with Spot TV News just days later and completely flipped the script. He hadn't touched a single illegal substance. What happened on that street was a severe, visible mental health crisis. He laid out a personal history that immediately sucked the air out of the room and silenced a lot of the smug online commentators. Over the span of a few years, Sangbo had lost literally everyone close to him. His sister died in a horrific traffic accident on an icy road. His father passed away in 2010. 8 years later, his mother lost her battle with a terminal illness. He was entirely alone, drowning in profound grief and trying to keep his head above water with legally prescribed antidepressants and tranquilizers. He had the medical records and the prescriptions sitting right there to prove it. He directly called out the media for claiming he admitted to doing drugs, stating flat out that it was a lie, and pointing out the obvious logic that if he had actually confessed to a narcotics charge, he wouldn't be sitting at home giving interviews to the press. Then the actual evidence started to surface, and the whole situation reeked of police and media incompetence. The narrative that authorities initially pushed fell apart under the weight of his official hospital files. His narcotics test came back completely negative. His urine test showed absolutely nothing abnormal. The psychiatric records from his doctors confirmed the severe depression and anxiety. Even the substance test conducted at Hanyang University Hospital explicitly stated there was zero evidence that he had misused his medication. So what about the CCTV footage that supposedly showed him acting like a wild addict? Sangbo had a painfully mundane explanation for that. He was walking uphill to a supermarket wearing slippers, tripped on a raised part of the sidewalk, and stumbled. That's it. As for the so-called positive drug test the police leaked to the press, Sangbo explained the test actually showed 2 lines, which medically indicates a negative result, but one of the lines was faint. He said medical staff told him that psychiatric medication can sometimes cause a faint reaction on those tests. You really have to ask yourself how different this entire nightmare would have been if the police had just looked at his medical history before handcuffing a grieving orphan on a public street. What makes this story so deeply frustrating to look back on is the sheer lack of basic human decency in how he was treated from minute one. Sangbo went on CBS radio in October and detailed the lingering trauma of those 3 weeks in custody. He explained that he just wanted something to eat during the Chuseok holiday. Everything was closed for the holiday, so he grabbed food from a convenience store, took his prescribed dose of medication, and drank a can and a half of beer because he was unbearably lonely. On his walk back, police just handcuffed him on the spot. He was locked up for almost 3 weeks. He wasn't allowed to contact anyone. And to add insult to injury, he had to personally pay out of pocket for the medical exams the police forced him to undergo. He sat in a cell while the media painted him as a junkie, completely completely powerless to stop the story from spiraling out of control. Even after he was officially cleared of all charges on September 30th, the psychological damage was done. He said the trauma was so deep that he couldn't even open a basic bottle of cold medicine after getting out without having a panic attack. He was so terrified of the outside world that he moved out of his own home and hid at an acquaintance's lodging just to avoid being seen. This is where you really have to look at how the Korean entertainment industry and its media ecosystem handle scandal. They don't wait for the courts. They don't care about medical records. Agencies go silent, sponsors pull out, and casting directors quietly drop your name from future projects. Sangbo openly admitted he was terrified his career was over, not because he did anything wrong, but because the label of a drug scandal is a fatal stain in Korea that rarely washes out. He expressed the most agonizing guilt over the cast and crew of Miss Monty Cristo. Since he had no living family, he said that crew had become his surrogate family during filming, and the thought of dragging their hard work into the mud ate him alive. He took responsibility for the carelessness of the situation, which is a wildly unfair thing for a man to say when his only crime was tripping in slippers while grieving his dead parents. But that is the immense pressure of the industry. You apologize for the public disruption, even if the public disruption was based on a lie. He had taken to Instagram during Chuseok right in the middle of the fallout to try and explain the human side of what was happening. He apologized for worrying people, but he also laid bare his reality. He was spending the holiday completely alone. With no family left to visit, he had grown increasingly reliant on his medication just to function, to the point where missing a dose made him feel like he was falling apart. He said the hardest part of the entire ordeal wasn't the damage to his acting career. It was being branded an addict. He found that label deeply painful on a purely human level. A guy just trying to survive his depression being called a criminal. He tried to put the pieces back together. He quietly went back to work, taking a role in The Elegant Empire in 2023, just showing up on set and doing his job. By 2025, he had signed an exclusive contract with a new agency, Korea Management Group. It genuinely felt like he was slowly crawling out of the hole the media dug for him, which is why the news on March 27th felt like a punch to the gut. Reports emerged that Sangbo had been found deceased at his home. He was 44 years old. A family member discovered him around 12:40 in the afternoon and called the authorities. Police stated there were no signs of foul play. His agency released a short, devastated statement confirming the passing, setting up a wake at the Pyeongtaek Central Funeral Home and begging the public and the media to just leave the family alone. And then, almost as a final silent gesture, his Instagram disappeared. His family wiped the account. Every post, every interaction, every connection he had with the fans who actually stood by him through 2022 just erased from the internet.